Welcome to Section 4.1, Lesson 2. Here we'll look at the advantages and disadvantages of different graphs. So to date we have looked at line graphs, circle graphs, bar graphs, and histograms. So example 1. A class of 26 students were asked to identify their favorite lunch. 7 chose garlic fingers, 8 chose pizza, 5 chose subs, 3 chose chicken fingers, and 3 chose something else. So what type of graph would best represent this data? We don't need to actually graph the data, just state which one we would use. Well, here, because the data is divided into different categories, garlic fingers, pizza, subs, then either a bar graph or a circle graph could be used here. They are best to use in these situations. So the reason being, we can say it's a great visual way to display discrete data. Meaning data that is in separate categories. So in general, for discrete data, you would use either a bar graph or a circle graph. And for continuous data, you would use either a line graph or a histogram. So let's look at example 2. The lifetime in years of 30 light bulbs are given in the table below. What type of graph would best represent this data? Well, we have a lot of data here. This could easily be broken into bins. So I would say a histogram would be best here. And the reason being is that the data is continuous. It's not discrete like the last one. And can easily be grouped into bins. So we can divide the number of years, something like 3 to 4 years, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and so on. And then do your tally, and then your histogram. Now example 3. One factor which determines a crop yield is the amount of fertilizer used. The table below contains data for 10 acres of land. What type of graph would best represent this data? So looking at the table, I see that as the amount of fertilizer increases, the crop yield increases as well. So doing a line graph here would nicely show that relationship. Also, line graphs are used in continuous data, which is what we have here. So the reason being is that the data is continuous. And line graphs are good to show trends in data. You can easily see that relationship between the amount of fertilizer increasing and the crop yield increasing. Now let us summarize the different types of graphs and look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. Now a circle graph is very visually appealing, and you can see the percentages of each section and how one section can then be easily compared to the other sections by looking at the size. Disadvantages, it doesn't actually show the number of data, only the percentage. And they are much more difficult to draw than the other types of graphs. You have to find the percentages and then find the percent of a circle and then use a protractor to accurately draw each section. You can only use it with discrete data as well. Now a bar graph shows the actual number of data, so that's an advantage. And you can easily compare 2 or 3 sets of data on the same graph. Now, sometimes you can't always read the exact values when the bar ends in between values on the vertical axes. It all kind of depends on the scale, so sometimes it's hard to read. Now, for a histogram, it is also visually appealing, like a circle graph, and it displays the continuous data in ordered columns. But again, you can't always read exact values because the data is grouped into different categories. Like a circle graph, we don't know exactly how many is in each bin. And it's also more difficult to compare 2 sets of data. Now, a line graph is great in order to compare 2 or more sets of data. And they're also good for showing trends in data as well. As one thing increases, the other could increase as well, or decrease. You can easily see that relationship on a line graph. Now, a disadvantage is that you can only use it with continuous data, and again, it may be difficult to read exact values depending on the scale.